Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Practical Alchemist. I'm Meg. Nice to meet you. If you're new here, welcome back if you've been here before. I hope that this message comes through coherently because as I was walking the dog just now, I had 5 or 6 different fairly disparate thoughts that kind of came in sequence, and in the moment, they linked together quite nicely in my brain. But I'm hoping that I can reproduce that right now. And what initiated this thought was my persistent frustration recently with expenses. And not just in the basic, I'm broke kind of sense, but more so in the sense of it always feels like I am paying for things that are convenient and to a degree required, but to a much bigger degree not required, and wouldn't necessarily ruin my life if I was without them, but I would have to make adjustments, right? And so I'll give you an example. Today's frustrating finances issue was I got a notification from Microsoft that I was due to repay my annual fee so I could continue using things like Microsoft Word, Excel, like the Microsoft Office stuff. And I've been out of my full-time job in the Army for a little over 2 years now. I have disengaged from basically all work obligations on purpose. And so I don't really have a big use for Microsoft Word right now, or Excel, or the other products, other than for whatever purposes I have for writing, journaling, creative expressions that don't create a necessity for my livelihood necessarily. And so I was sitting there thinking, I don't want to keep paying this annual fee, especially if I don't need to work from home. So how can I make this easier for myself? And so I did some quick research and found a .org, a nonprofit organization that actually wrote a program that has met much of the same functionality as Microsoft Word. I downloaded it for free, and it looked and felt pretty familiar, like user-friendly, easy enough that if I wanted to continue writing my book on it, that I could. And I was grateful, so I went to their website and I donated $11, which is significantly less than what I would have paid if I were to re-up with Microsoft. Anyway, the whole point of bringing that up is I continually lately also dance with this idea of what does a future world look like? Because I think that our imaginations are remarkably powerful tools. To some degree, I think the fact that each of us exist and that we are so unique and leading such unique lives is a result of or evidence of source energy's creative capacity. And so when we exercise that creativity, 333 as I said that, then we are aligning ourselves with source energy, right? Creativity through art, through music, drawing, writing, poetry, dance, whatever it is, or even creativity through the imagination, envisioning the future world that we would like to live in, or the future life that we would like to have. Some people call that manifestation. So imagining the future world, I spent a lot of time recently very deliberately disengaging with the news on social media, on TV, as much as I can possible, because if it's true, what Dr. Joe Dispenza says, that where you put your attention is where you put your energy. I want my energy going towards the thing that I want more of, or that I want to create, not the things that I don't want to exist. So I don't watch the news. The big important pieces of news that are critical for me to know, they find me. And otherwise, that system works really well for my mental health lately. But I spent a lot of time thinking about, as an alternative, thinking about what could the future world look like if we were all to exist in a state that is aligned with our highest soul, that unique spark of light and frequency that is in this moment existing and, and running the avatar that is this meat sack, this body that we're in. If we align with that higher self, what does the future look like? And I think the future involves going back to an informal economy. I think that's one part of it. Meg's future ideal world involves an informal economy where money is no longer needed. People can trade goods and services. People interface with neighbors in order to have needs met. And so with that, I think it's powerful to start investing my behavior towards the future that I want. So not only is it something to imagine, but it's something toward which I must invest. So what does that look like? 555, as I said that. That looks like deciding that I don't want to pay for a service that's way too expensive and doesn't really meet a need anymore just because it's convenient. So I'm going to do the slightly harder thing by putting in some time to research an alternative. This is just a small example. There are a million different ways that we can invest in the future that we want. And so I think that this is the overarching theme for the stream of thoughts that I've had today. The overarching theme is, are you investing in the future that you want for yourself and for the world? Another thought that I had while I was walking the dog and thinking all of these things in sequence is that I lost it. It'll come back. What on earth was that thought? Invest in the future that you want. Anyhow, we invest through behavior, I believe, for a couple reasons. One, because every activity that we take is a physical manifestation. Now I'm not talking about the metaphysical, close your eyes and imagine it and feel that you have it and feel grateful for the thing that you want, even if you don't physically have it yet. I'm talking about the literal manifestation of, I have no sandwich and I enter the kitchen and assemble some lunch meat and cheese and bread into a stack, and therefore now I have a sandwich. That is a manifestation. It started as an idea and now it's real. And so with the intentional investment towards what we want, we are manifesting, even if you have to take all the steps. Some people take shortcuts and hacks that are based on energy work and, meditation to manifest in a more intangible way, which is cool. I'm still working on that one as well. But, I also saw on YouTube the other day a very famous astrologer having a discussion with someone and describing that. Why do I keep losing my train of thought? It pops in and then it leaves. This must be perimenopause. Okay. What was she saying? Oh, okay. Controversy alert. Fair warning, this might be a bit controversial. She was saying that in order for us to stop world wars, as in wars that are occurring globally, like the conflict in Ukraine and Israel, to stop them, we stop paying attention to them. And I acknowledge that this is very controversial, and I completely appreciate that for some of you, these conflicts may be deeply personal in ways that I could never fully fathom without having had your experience. And so I hope that, for those of you out there that are very specifically being impacted by this personally, I hope that you'll take what I say as a grain of salt or with a grain of salt, or, you're lovingly invited to step away if this is not something that you want to hear. But to pay attention to something is to give it energy, is the point that she was making. And to pay attention to these conflicts is to give them energy. And so you might say, but Meg, I really care about this conflict for whatever reason. It's very personal to me for whatever reason. I want to invest energy in supporting the side that I support or I want to invest energy in, say, diminishing the loss of life that's unnecessary, or the unnecessary suffering that's happening as a result of the conflict, which I think are both, they're all valid approaches, absolutely, and honorable things to care about. But I don't think all of us on the large scale have a specific necessary calling to get involved in paying such close attention if we're the person that's powerless to help it, if that makes sense. Like, as an example, if you work a full-time job and you're a full-time parent and you watch the news and your heart breaks for people that are suffering in a conflict, but you don't have the finances to contribute to relieving that conflict, or you don't have the time or the bandwidth, the cognitive energy available to contribute to helping the aspect of that conflict that most bothers you, I don't think that's a reason to beat yourself up. And I think that's also a controversial statement, because there are a lot of people online right now talking about how, if you don't do something, you're wrong. And I think that's just too simplistic for the complexities involved in human existence. So I do think that there is something to this concept of, if you want it to stop paying attention to it. Because that's an energetic disinvestment, much the same way that there's an energetic investment towards the things that you want. Like, if you want the future world to have an informal economy where money is not necessary, then you find opportunities to trade goods and services with people. Or if you want a future world that's more peaceful, you practice peace and invest in the process of creating peace by extending your peacefulness to people that you encounter at the bank or at the grocery store or at work. If you want more compassion in the world, you invest in that outcome by exchanging compassion with others, by providing it openly and freely. If you want a really fit body, you invest in that by exercising and changing your mindset from I don't really care to I'm an athlete, or I behave like an athlete so I can have the body of an athlete and the fitness and the capabilities of an athlete. Any number of things that there's pick your poison for what outcome you want. The main point being, we all have the power to invest towards the future that we want, whether or not it manifests immediately. We all have the capacity to invest towards the future that we want in our own small way. By the way, there are a lot of spiritual leaders out there right now also saying that if you want the world to change your own energy, because that's the most powerful thing that you have at your disposal right now. And I couldn't agree more with that. And by the way, since I've stopped watching the news very deliberately, my life has become immensely more peaceful. And if perception is reality in some cases, then I think that my energy investment has been worthwhile. So I hope all of that came together for you. The last thing that I thought about that maybe I'll find a way to tie into the rest of this stream of thought is, I feel myself very pulled recently to make faster decisions upon which I ruminate less than I would have in the past. Why? I've gone through what I believe is a spiritual awakening, or a series of spiritual awakenings and recognitions in the last year. And especially in the last few days, I feel very different. I feel like I'm kind of walking around an old familiar environment with a new lens on. And I believe that new lens for me is, what do I want to be different? And the former me spent a lot of time hyper-analyzing every decision down to the nth degree before just hitting the button and saying, go for it. So I think the lesson in that for me is not necessarily to run around making reckless decisions without considering the consequences, but rather because I've spent a lot of time questioning and second guessing my own thoughts and decision making for fear of negative consequences and for fear of, anxiety related fear issues. I can now more easily lean into intuition and make split-second decisions, trusting that I now have a filter of wisdom. I now want to pass every decision I make through a filter of wisdom, but not necessarily a filter of fear. So when I sat down to make this video, the old me kind of came to the surface in my mind for a moment and said, I don't know if you can string all these thoughts together coherently. Don't really know if anyone's going to see any value in this. Might get judged for the frizzy post-workout hair and lack of makeup. La, la, la. And then new me took the microphone and said, yeah, but we've had this conversation a million times before. And wisdom tells us that it really doesn't matter what other people think. They're going to judge you either way. And wisdom said, remember that you do what feels right now. You're led by intuition, not by anxiety. And intuition struck me with inspiration for this video. So here we are doing it. I will probably edit certain sections out because I've had a couple brain lapses, but nonetheless, the video is here. So if you're feeling new too, or different or weird, or like you're in some kind of strange movie that you've seen before, but suddenly there's a plot twist and you're not sure why, I don't think that's a coincidence. I think that the overall shift in consciousness that this world is going through means that there are a lot of us that are experiencing very similar things. And I'm not the only one saying that by far. So if you are experiencing that in the last week, like I am, maybe you have an opportunity to look at how you've changed recently and what you moved yourself away from, and you can begin to conscientiously and with awareness pass your decision making through the filters that you want, the filters that, and not the filters that you don't want. Which I guess also ties back into investing in the future that you want. I want to live my life more intuitively. I want to make decisions based on, yes, the wisdom that I have, but also based on what my higher self is calling me to do, which I consider to be my intuition. Instead of making decisions based on anxiety or a concern for what other people think, which as a recovering people pleaser is no easy feat, let me tell you. I'm sure some of you can commiserate with that. Anyway, I hope you've had a great first week of 2026. I hope you're well, you're happy, you're healthy, and you are expanding at whatever rate you want to expand. Until next time, talk soon.